As you know, that sometime in mid-February, it is speculated, the United States will reach its debt limit. And what this means is that the amount of access we have to cash, be it through borrowing or revenue from taxes, to pay off the money that has already been spent and appropriated by Congress will be reached. In other words, when we raise the debt ceiling limit, we are not spending more money. We are paying off the bills that we had accumulated over the past year. And the Republicans have been squawking about how they're not going to allow the raising of the debt limit unless there are draconian cuts. Cuts, of course, which they will not delineate. They want the president and the Democrats to not only acquiesce to cuts in these programs, but also to actually come up with the idea of what to cut. Because, of course, they are afraid of the political implications of those cuts and need the Democrats to essentially jump over the cliff with them. I mean, I point you, cliff not as in fiscal cliff, but in the cliff of we're all going to jump out of the boat together. In fact, I use those words because there was a Time magazine piece that Digby highlighted just the other day. Maybe it was today or yesterday. This is from July 14th, 2011 by J. Newton Small and Michael Shearer. And she highlights it for the reason that we know that President Obama has had on his agenda to perform some type of entitlement reform. And when we talk about entitlement reform, we're, of course, talking about cuts. He was seeking a grand bargain even prior to his inauguration in 2009, in January 20th, 2009, nearly 4 years ago today. And there's a graph in this piece, and we know that these negotiations between Bonaire and President Obama led to the much reported offer from President Obama that Social Security cuts would be on the table. And here is this piece. It's a quote from the president. "I'm the president of the United States," Obama told Bonaire. "You're the Speaker of the House. We're the two most responsible leaders right now." And so they began to talk about the truly epic possibility of using the threat, the genuine danger of default, that being if you do not pay the bills that you owe, and the Treasury issues interest checks on Treasury bonds, and somebody takes them to the bank, and they bounce, it's default. Using the genuine danger of default to freeze out their respective extremists. I guess that would be at least half of that calculation would be people like you and I, and I guess 80% of the public that doesn't want Social Security cut, 76% of the public that doesn't want Medicare benefits cut. To freeze out their respective extremists and make the kind of historic deal that no one really thought possible anymore. And this is where, as I've been mentioning in the past, that those separate buckets that sit in the administration, metaphorical buckets, of which need to be filled to create a legacy for the administration. Bigger than when Reagan and Tip O'Neill overhauled the tax code in 1986, or when Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich passed welfare reform a decade later. You see, here we have the welfare reform, which was so destructive, referenced not in a negative light in terms of Bill Clinton's legacy, but in a positive light. So for those of you who think, well, how could it possibly be that President Obama perceives entitlement cuts, social insurance cuts, whatever you want to call it, we all know what it is, as something that could build his legacy? Well, it's because 20 years later, somebody in Time magazine or Time ebook or whatever it's going to be called, or probably nothing, will write, just like when Bonaire and Obama got together. to reform entitlements. It would include deeper cuts in spending, the elimination of all kinds of tax loopholes, and lower income tax rates for all. Come on, you and I, Bonaire admitted, telling Obama, let's lock arms and we'll jump out of the boat together. Now, fortunately, that jaunt in the metaphorical ocean was never enjoyed by our two frolicking, responsible leaders, because the Republicans were just so darn crazy that they couldn't accept yes for an answer. So that brings us to this next round of hostage taking by the Republican Party. And Dave Weigel has an interesting piece from beginning of this week, yesterday, talking about how we got to this place. Around 10 years ago, before the Iraq War and the second round of the Bush tax cuts, a New York Times reporter parachuted into the Hoover Institution to tap the wisdom of conservative economists. The last deficit had come in at $159 billion, unimaginably low today. And John F. Kogan, a former OMB economist for Reagan and Bush 1, in the Hoover Institution wrote, it's wrong to allow surpluses because these surpluses invariably lead to higher spending. Governments simply cannot hang on to money. And thus became the justification that was used by Alan Greenspan in his testimony to the Senate as to why tax cuts need to take place. A surplus is dangerous. Now, there are others who speculate that Greenspan also knew that recessions often follow. And in fact, I think the last 7 recessions have followed the accumulation of a government surplus for reasons that we have discussed with David Graeber on this program in the past. And he goes on to say that, yes, Republicans have approached every fiscal crisis, real or imagined, as the opening act of an entitlement-cutting negotiation. That was the reason why they eventually broke on taxes. He's speaking about the fiscal cliff deal that took place a week ago now. And I would argue they didn't even break on taxes. That was the reason why a fundamental rationale for Republicans' tax fundamentalism was the belief that higher taxes would always be applied to higher spending. Quote, the basic purpose of any tax cut program in today's environment, said future Federal Reserve Chairman and Alan Greenspan in 1978, is to reduce the momentum of expenditure growth by restraining the amount of revenues available and trust that there is a political limit to deficit spending. Now, I should say that Alan Greenspan was refuted on this point by the late William Nickerson, who was the head of the Cato Institute, I think during the 80s and 90s. And in a study that he did called Starving the Beast, which of course has been the Republican mantra for 30 years, the idea that if we somehow deny the government revenue, we will be able to starve the beast being government, shrink it down to the size in which it could be drowned in the bathtub, in the famous words of Grover Norquist. William Nickerson basically did a study that showed that when you cut revenue below 19% of GDP, what happens is you actually increase the size of government because people think they're getting a deal. Nobody has a problem with spending, particularly if you cut their taxes, because they just don't feel the implications of that spending. It's all on the credit card. I can assure you that in my experience just with my own daughter, when we put down the plastic, she has no implications. She understands no implications to purchasing that next Captain Underpants book. But when we say to her, this is coming out of your allowance, give me the $1.95 for it, suddenly it changes. I actually had an amazing moment with my daughter today. In between going to school and then heading to her after school, she gets picked up by another parent, and they stop off and get a snack. Now, at the after school, they also have a snack, but it's not of the quality of going out and getting a bagel, let's say. And so we give her $4 or $5. that she's supposed to get the snack with this other parent. And we're walking to school today, and she goes, if I don't get a snack after school and just wait until I get to the after school and eat their snack, I'm going to keep the $5 and I'm going to save it up for something that I really want to buy. I almost broke down in tears. I was so happy to hear that. That's the famous marshmallow experiment where you put the marshmallow in front of the kid and you say, I'm going to leave you here with that marshmallow in front of your face for 2 minutes. And when I come back, if you don't eat that marshmallow, I'll give you 2. So that is the dynamic we know that happens when revenues fall below 19%. Right now, at least prior to this, the expiration of the Bush tax cuts on a very narrow subset of the American population, for everyone who is making over $450,000 as a couple, every dollar after that $450,000 is now subjected to a higher marginal tax rate. We were at about 15% of GDP in terms of revenues. In 2005, Weigel writes, the last time a Republican president in Congress campaigned for entitlement cuts, George W. Bush warned that Social Security was headed towards bankruptcy and that by the year 2042, the entire system would be exhausted and bankrupt. The crisis got a little deflated when he said, well, we're not going to raise taxes on Social Security taxes to address it. Not so much of a crisis, I guess. And he says that while Republicans are now walking around with a poll done by the Winston Group, testing their messaging and positioning on the debt limit, and it's emboldening them, there are numbers deeper in that poll which suggest that they are also facing a messaging problem. When the Winston Group asked its subjects about a few programs that theoretically could be slashed, there were 7 possibilities: reducing government programs for people like you, cutting defense spending, means testing Social Security, raising the Medicare retirement age, raising taxes, ending charitable tax deductions, and ending the mortgage deduction. Only one of these, means testing Social Security, won more support than opposition. And I should add that we already means test Social Security. If you're above a certain threshold of income in your retirement, you are taxed on that, on those Social Security benefits. If you're not, you're not. That is means testing. So when you talk to House Republicans, writes Weigel, they're not sure what to do with this. They worry about the message. In a 3-page open letter sent in regards to the cliff negotiations in December, they suggested more than $900 billion in mandatory spending cuts without specifying what might be cut. For 30 years, he writes, Republicans have struggled to find a crisis that could build support for real entitlement cuts. Now the polls tell them that they found it. That's why it took so little time from them to rebound from the so-called cliff loss. And so the idea is how to take the debt ceiling limit off the table, not just because it strips the Republicans of some type of leverage regarding cuts to Social Security and Medicare, but also it strips the administration, the Obama administration, of that same leverage. They can no longer point to the Republicans not raising the debt ceiling limit and what everybody seems to agree would be genuinely catastrophic for the economy.